From the Toronto studios, this is Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Zahra Syed. Our top story tonight. Cartoonist Dick Wright has published a series of what are being called racist and anti-Palestinian political cartoons. His latest, which was published on Wednesday in the Daily Herald, falsely claims that American student groups calling for a ceasefire in Gaza are fronts for Hamas. In another cartoon, he calls Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, the House's only Palestinian American representatives, a rabid dog and shows Democrats trying to subdue her. This has echoes of a statement by Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who told reporters, "We are fighting against human animals." In a third cartoon, Wright shows Tlaib uttering hate towards Jews. On his website, Wright claims to be an award-winning editorial cartoonist, drawing for the San Diego Union, the Providence Journal, Scripps Howard newspapers, and the Columbus Dispatch. Tlaib is facing tremendous criticism and pressure. She was censured this week in the House of Republicans and 22 of her own Democratic colleagues. So far, Israeli airstrikes have destroyed 59 mosques and damaged 136 mosques in Gaza. So far, Israeli airstrikes have destroyed 59 mosques and damaged 136 mosques in Gaza. On Wednesday, they damaged the Khalid bin al-Walid and the Al-Ikhlas mosques in the village of Khan Yunis. Ikrami al-Mudallal, spokesman for the Ministry of Endowments in the Gaza Strip, added that Israel also attacked a third mosque in Gaza, the Al-Sahwa Mosque. The Israeli bombardment has also destroyed 3 churches. Attacking civilian facilities such as places of worship is a violation of the rules of war in international law. Israel has claimed Hamas fighters are hiding in and around these sites. A spokesperson for the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs described life in northern Gaza as hell on earth as Israel deepens its blockade and bombardment. Israeli forces shelled the courtyards of Al-Shifa hospital, the largest medical complex in the besieged enclave, early Friday. The attack hit the outpatient clinic and the maternity ward, killing several people and wounding others, according to health officials. Thousands of Palestinians have been seeking refuge at the Al-Shifa from Israel's onslaught. The World Health Organization says that as Gaza's biggest hospital came under Israeli bombardment Friday, 20 Gaza hospitals are no longer able to function. The WHO spokesperson Margaret Harris says there was intense violence at the Al-Shifa site, quoting colleagues on the ground. Data published by the Council on American Islamic Relations shows an unprecedented rise in reported cases of anti-Muslim and anti-Arab bias following Israel's war on Palestine. Between October 7th and November 4th, the Muslim Advocacy Group received 1,283 requests for assistance and reports of bias, a 216% increase over the previous year. During a typical 29-day span in 2022, CARE received 406 such complaints on average. People seeking assistance include high school and university students, doctors and other workers, protesters, and mosques. CARE Research and Advocacy Director Corey Saylor says Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism are out of control in a way not seen in nearly 10 years. Saylor notes that American Muslims are facing the largest wave of Islamophobic prejudice the Muslim group has documented since former President Donald Trump announced the Muslim ban in 2017. In related news, the U.S. Congress's 3 Muslim American lawmakers are warning that anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian hatred is rampant in the nation's politics. Representatives Andre Carson, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, all Democrats, referred to legislation introduced last week by Republican Representative Ryan Zinke to forcibly expel some Palestinians from the United States. They say this is a part of a rising tide of a bigoted anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian hatred that permeates our politics. Zinke, an official in former President Donald Trump's administration, introduced the legislation last week. It aims to prevent Palestinians from obtaining new visas and refugee status and granting them asylum. Carson, Omar, and Tlaib say using the full power of the state to persecute a particular ethnic group or nationality is fascism and pure bigotry. They say this bill by a former cabinet member directly violates the United States Constitution and would unlawfully destroy the lives of hundreds of thousands of Palestinian immigrants. The lawmakers also noted statements by several Republican members of the House and Senate calling for the complete destruction of besieged Gaza. They say this dangerous rhetoric is already costing lives, as with the murder of a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy in Illinois. More than 500 former campaign staffers who played pivotal roles in electing President Joe Biden in 2020 have urged for a ceasefire in Gaza. The appeal, made in a letter released Thursday, amplifies mounting pressure on the Biden administration to bring an end to the conflict. It asked Biden to use his influence in this perilous moment to call for a ceasefire, hostage exchange, and de-escalation. They urged him to take concrete steps to address the conditions of occupation, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing at the root of the horrific violence. The Biden administration and Congress have remained steadfast in their support for Israel. However, voices of opposition have been growing within the ranks of staff members, grassroots organizations, and activists. The American Postal Workers Union, representing United States Postal Service employees, joined the call for a ceasefire on Thursday. Last week, employees at the U.S. Agency for International Development circulated a letter demanding an immediate ceasefire, garnering more than 1,000 signatures. Hundreds of congressional staffers staged a walkout on Wednesday, demanding an end to the war. The letter from people who worked on Biden's campaign underscores the alarming death toll in Gaza, which has now reached over 11,000, and the mass displacement of its residents in its northern parts. In a sweeping military raid and drone strikes, Israeli forces have killed at least 11 Palestinians in Jenin city and a refugee camp. Hamas is not the government in that region. The Palestinian Health Ministry reports more than 20 people have been wounded with the ongoing military operation. For more than 6 hours, thousands of students in Jenin were trapped in their schools due to a tightened Israeli siege coinciding with the Jenin camp attack. Eyewitnesses say more than 3,000 children were stranded with their teachers, causing extreme panic. In other parts of the West Bank, 3 people, including a 15-year-old boy, were killed in separate raids in Bethlehem, Hebron, and Ramallah. Journalist Shata Hanesha in Jenin described the situation as the Israeli army raided a house with supposed Palestinian fighters, leading to a violent confrontation. Israeli military reinforcements flooded into Jenin, and the area around the camp was completely closed off with indiscriminate firing. A drone strike also resulted in casualties in the refugee camp. Israeli soldiers were reportedly detaining citizens at random during the operation. Medical teams were finally able to evacuate the trapped students to a public hall inside Jenin later that evening. It is the latest in a series of clashes in the West Bank, with more than 176 people killed by Israeli forces and settlers since October. Israeli forces have been conducting wide-scale raids and arrests across the West Bank, with Jenin being a focal point of operations. Israeli Supreme Court denies anti-war protest permits. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Israel's highest court has refused permits for protests in the Arab community against Israel's war on Palestine. The Israeli Supreme Court dismissed petitions by the political party Hadash and Adallah, the legal center for Arab minority rights in Israel. These sought permission for demonstrations in Arab-majority cities like Sachin and Al-Fahm. The court's verdict said the country is facing a complex reality which requires rethinking the right to assemble and protest. Israeli police previously expressed concerns about the potential threat to public safety and security if demonstrations were allowed to proceed. The Supreme Court ultimately sided with the police, noting the demonstrations would necessitate a significant deployment of personnel, leaving fewer resources available for other critical emergency duties. The court acknowledged the heavy burden placed on the police over the past month and the impracticality of allocating manpower to maintain public order. A couple of weeks ago, Israeli police intervened in a demonstration in Haifa, forcibly preventing Arab and Jewish participants from gathering to protest the Gaza conflict. Activists in Austria have criticized the country's media coverage of protests in support of Palestine, claiming it provokes polarization and Islamophobia. In interviews with Anadolu news agency, publisher Gerhard Hertenberger and writer Wilhelm Langthaler expressed concerns about the media's pro-Israel stance and use of manipulative language. They argued the media frames Israel's actions in Gaza as legitimate self-defense, which they find problematic. Hertenberger highlighted the challenges of criticizing Austria's pro-Israel media without being labeled anti-Semitic. Both activists noted the banning of certain slogans at pro-Palestine demonstrations and criticized what they perceived as biased media coverage in favor of Israel. They also emphasized the rise of Islamophobia in Austria as a concerning issue, suggesting it may be politically motivated. Hertenberger said news reports generally have a pro-Israel perspective and do not discuss the problematic issues of the Israeli government. He said media reports about solidarity demonstrations with Palestine carry headlines such as anti-Semitism is rising in Austria and support for terrorism, not Palestine. Langthaler said anti-Semitism in the late 19th century and first part of 20th century has now been replaced by Islamophobia. Approximately 4,600 displaced pregnant women and 380 newborn babies require medical attention in Gaza. The United Nations Palestinian Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, says its shelters have become the first home of newborns. Citing the UN Population Fund, the agency said there are 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza, and more than 180 are giving birth daily. Afghanistan's administration has pleaded for assistance in managing the surge of returning Afghan refugees from neighboring Pakistan. Suhail Shaheen, the Taliban's nominee to the United Nations, emphasized the humanitarian crisis with about 300,000 undocumented Afghan refugees returning home. Pakistan previously announced a deadline of October 31st for the deportation of all undocumented foreigners, primarily Afghan refugees. This influx coincides with the Taliban's efforts to stabilize Afghanistan's economy and struggle to secure international funding. No foreign nation has officially recognized Afghanistan's interim administration. Under Pakistan's illegal foreigners repatriation plan, nearly 1 million people, mostly Afghans, are targeted for deportation. The United Nations and the Afghan interim administration have urged Islamabad to halt this process. Shaheen called attention to the urgent needs of incoming refugees, including settlement, food, drinking water, blankets, and tents. He asked the international community to help these refugees who have faced hardships in Pakistan. The Taliban has established 12 committees to oversee the repatriation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan and created tent cities in border cities to accommodate them. The United Arab Emirates has reportedly shipped around 20,000 tents for the incoming refugees. According to the United Nations data, during the first 4 days of November, more than 60% of arrivals from Pakistan were children. Their condition is dire, with many having undertaken long journeys and now stranded at the border. Researchers in Seattle have developed a groundbreaking pacemaker that uses energy from a person's heartbeat to partially recharge itself. The heartbeat currently generates only 10% of the required energy for the next beat. This breakthrough aims to revolutionize the pacemaker technology and eliminate the need for battery replacement surgeries. The newly designed wireless pacemaker is compact, measuring 1/3 the size of a AAA battery and residing entirely within the heart's right ventricle. Dr. Babak Nazar of the University of Washington in Seattle led the project. He expressed hope that this innovation could extend battery life and benefit younger patients, reducing the number of unnecessary implants over their lifetimes. Nazar envisions collaborating with major pacemaker companies to incorporate their design and housing into existing leadless pacemakers. The technology behind the experimental wireless pacemaker involves converting mechanical energy into electrical energy. Traditional pacemakers have limitations, including the difficulty of battery replacement, leading to patients receiving additional implants. Both traditional and wireless pacemakers typically last 6 to 15 years. Nazar emphasized the need for long-term trials with human subjects to ensure the device's effectiveness. Achieving battery recharge rates of 20% to 30% could significantly prolong the functional life of the pacemaker. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.